Have you ever tried calling the person you love most while hovering between life and death, only to have them hang up on you? Have you ever lain on a stretcher in the back of an ambulance, the siren wailing in your ears like a wire being pulled through your skull, while the robotic voice on the other end of the phone repeated, "The number you have dialed is currently unavailable"? Have you ever been wheeled under the blinding glare of an operating light, an anesthesia mask descending over your face, and had your last conscious thought be not, "I'm scared," but do they even know where I am? I have. That night, I lay on the operating table with yellow iodine lines painted across my stomach, the surgical light overhead so bright it hurt to look at. The anesthesiologist told me to count backward from 10. I got to 4 before everything went dark. 3 hours later, I woke up in a hospital room that was empty except for me. The curtains were a pale, institutional green, drawn halfway, and beyond them the night pressed in, heavy and deep. A nurse had retrieved my phone from the storage locker and placed it on the bedside table. The screen glowed with 94 red missed call notifications. 94 missed calls. The ambulance siren was that stretched, thin, keening sound, like a rusty wire threaded through one ear and pulled out the other, back and forth, endless. I lay on the narrow, hard stretcher, a round light above me flickering in and out, on and off, like a dying flashlight making its last stand. Someone in rubber gloves held my right wrist down, and I could feel a tacky wetness against the inside of my arm, blood, maybe, or something else. The pressure was deliberate, careful, the kind of touch that was trying not to hurt. "Hang in there, sweetheart. We're almost there." The speaker wore a blue mask, only his eyes visible, small, puffy-lidded, threaded with fine red veins that spoke of a sleepless night and an emergency call that had yanked him out of bed. His voice came through the mask muffled and indistinct. I turned my head and saw a square of white gauze beside my wrist, a dark red stain blooming at its center, the edges already drying to a crusty brown. I stared at that gauze for a long time. My mind was sluggish, rusted, gears grinding against each other with a dull clunk, clunk, clunk. I don't quite remember how I got out of my apartment. The memory had been cut cleanly, like a pair of scissors through paper. One frame, me on the living room sofa, the faded floral upholstery rough against my cheek, a hot water bottle gone cold against my stomach, heavy and solid as a stone. The next frame, here, in this rocking, wailing vehicle, the flickering light overhead, the cold tackiness on my wrist, the siren's endless lament. I remembered sitting on that sofa in the afternoon. It was old, bought years ago, a cream-colored base printed with tiny pink and green flowers, all faded now into a blurred, misty pattern from too many washes. I lay curled on my side, knees drawn up to my chest, face buried in the crevice between the cushion and the armrest. That position made the dull, heavy ache in my belly just slightly more bearable, barely. On the coffee table lay a book, a blue paperback with a creased spine. Page 153. I'd been reading it for nearly 2 months, picking it up for a few pages at a time before setting it aside, then forgetting the plot and starting over. That afternoon, I'd thought I might finally finish it, clear the deck for the next one. But my stomach wouldn't let me. I read 2 pages, and the words floated on the paper, individual letters I recognized that refused to cohere into meaning, like a newspaper soaked through, all the ink bleeding into formless blurs. I put the book down, curled up again, then pushed myself up to get hot water from the kitchen. The kettle wasn't very hot anymore, lukewarm, really, but I filled the red rubber hot water bottle, screwed the cap tight, and carried it back to the sofa, pressing it against my belly. The warmth seeped in, a small hand pressing gently against the tangled knots of muscle and intestine, then releasing, and the pain that rushed back in after was somehow worse. I first noticed something was truly wrong around 2 in the afternoon. The ache, which had been a diffuse throb across my whole lower belly, began to concentrate, to pull inward toward a single point, finally settling in the lower right side. It felt like a fist punching the same spot, over and over, methodical, unrelenting. I thought it was stomach cramps. I swallowed a white ibuprofen tablet, oval, chalky, and it lodged in my throat halfway down, burning a raw path. I washed it down with a long gulp of cold water, the liquid traveling down my esophagus, pooling in my stomach, and then the pain surged back, worse now, like someone had rotated that fist to press the knuckles, the hardest part, against my abdominal wall, slow and steady pressure. I leaned back on the sofa, and my forehead broke out in sweat. Not the heat of summer kind, but a cold, fine sheaf that beaded along my hairline, trickled down my temples, and soaked into the fabric of the cushion. My fingers dug into the upholstery, knuckles white, nails turning a faint bluish crescent. I stared at the ceiling. A thin crack ran from the light fixture, curling across the white-painted surface like a quiet river, extending slowly, slowly. I'd never noticed that crack before. Lived here for years, and I was seeing it for the first time today. Then I remembered. Today was Henry's graduation. The last thing my mother had said to me that morning, before she walked out the door, was, if you're really not feeling well, just take a cab. Don't miss it. She'd been changing her shoes at the entryway, her hair pinned up in a perfect coil, pearl studs gleaming at her ears. She wore the lilac silk cheongsam she'd had tailored 3 months ago, the fabric hugging her figure, making her look years younger. When she bent to adjust her heel, the hem pulled tight across her calf. She smoothed it down quickly, glanced up at me, and frowned. "Null, you look terrible. Did you take your medicine?" "Yeah," I said. I was already curled up on the sofa, but from her angle she could only see half my face, half hidden behind my arm. She didn't press. She stepped into her other heel, steadied herself against the wall, picked up her new black crocodile print handbag, and checked herself in the hall mirror one last time, left profile, right profile, then reached up to straighten an earring. "I'm going," she said. "Text me before you leave, and when you get there, go straight to the private room. Your father reserved the Magnolia Hall, 3rd door on the right. Don't forget." Hum. The door opened and closed. Her heels clicked on the concrete steps outside, the sound fading, and then gone. Henry is 2 years older than me. He was always the golden child, top 3 in his class, first choice admissions to every school he applied to, the sole graduate school recommendation in his department. He looks like our father, tall, with a straight nose and a smile that brings out 2 shallow dimples. Everyone loves him. All the family photo albums, Henry fills 2/3 of the frames. The rest are me with our parents, and my mother always said, Henry was just so photogenic as a child. I never thought much of that at the time, but now, remembering it, I realize she wasn't wrong. When I started middle school, Henry was already a high school senior. That New Year's, relatives came to visit, and over tea and snacks, the conversation orbited around him like planets around a sun. Another first in the final. Won that math competition. Your teacher says you're a shoo-in for Tsinghua, right? Questions lobbed across the room like softballs, landing at Henry's feet. He'd pick them up, smile shyly, and say, "It's still early," while my mother jumped in, "Oh, he's just being modest. His teacher said it's all but guaranteed." I sat on a little stool in the corner, peeling an orange. It was sweet, juice sticky on my fingers. No one asked about my grades. I'd actually done well that semester, 8th in my class, 52nd in my grade, but my mother glanced at the report card, made a soft TSK sound, and said, "Still not quite where your brother was at your age." She folded the paper and tucked it in a drawer. I never saw it again. Maybe it got buried under a stack of old books, maybe thrown away. One winter night that year, Henry stayed late at school for a study session. It was almost 11 and he wasn't back yet. Dad was out of town on business, and Mom paced the living room, calling Henry's phone over and over with no answer. She finally threw on her coat and ran out the door. I ran after her, shouting, "Mom, where are you going?" She didn't turn around. To school, to check on Henry. Her footsteps pounded down the stairs, quick and frantic, like a little hammer striking tin. Henry had just lost track of time discussing problems with classmates. When he came home, Mom followed him in, and I saw her face from the doorway, first pale, then slowly reddening, eyes rimmed pink, lips pressed tight. She didn't say a word, just gripped Henry's wrist and pulled him inside. It was freezing that night. She'd gone out in her coat, but when she came back, the zipper was open, her pajama collar was flipped out, her hair whipped wild by the wind. Henry sat on the sofa drinking water, safe and sound. Mom stood in the kitchen, her back to us, shoulders heaving just a little, and then she turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on her face, the sound of the water drowning out whatever she didn't want us to see. I remember that night because her eyes were red when she came back, but she didn't cry. She never cried in front of Henry. Only in places I couldn't see, in the kitchen by the sink, on the dark balcony, behind closed bedroom doors, did she swallow those things, one by one. But that afternoon, as I curled on the sofa, the pain in my belly rose in waves, like a tide coming in and out, in and out. I held my phone in my hand, the screen lit up, the first name in my call log, Mom. I'd set that nickname back in middle school, with a pink heart emoji next to it. The heart had faded over time, a washed-out pink now, like a dried flower pressed too long. I pressed the green call button. 1 ring. 2 rings. 3 rings. Each ring was spaced about 2 seconds apart, like someone tapping a rubber mallet against a drum, and that drum was my chest, each beat vibrating through me. On the 4th ring, she picked up. "Hello? Nell? Are you here yet? Why aren't you here?" My mother's voice came through bright and upbeat, unmistakably the voice of someone at a party, with laughter and chatter and the clink of glasses in the background. "Mom." My voice came out raspy, a rough scrape like sandpaper against wood. I barely recognized it myself. A moment of silence. A real moment, just a second, then her voice dropped, the bright pitch plunging like a snapped string vibrating halfway down. "Nell? What's wrong with your voice? Have you not eaten? Did you take a cab?" "Mom, I called an ambulance." The line went dead quiet. I heard commotion on the other end, someone asking what happened? A chair scraping back, a distant voice shouting "Hey, sister-in-law, where are you going?" Then Mom's voice surfaced through the noise, shriller, faster, like a pair of scissors snapping through thread. "You called an ambulance." "What ambulance?" "You're home." Where are you right now?" "Nell, talk to me." But I had no strength left. Another wave of pain rolled through me, a hand twisting something inside. The phone slid out of my palm and clattered to the floor. The screen stayed lit, the call timer still ticking upward. 1 second, 2, 3. I lay with my cheek against the cold linoleum, eyes half open, watching the numbers climb from 23 seconds to 24, 25. Then the screen went black. Maybe she'd hung up. Maybe I'd hit something by accident. What happened after that is blurry. Like someone took an eraser to the chalkboard of my memory, leaving only jagged fragments. The door opening. Someone shouting, "Someone's collapsed in here." A face above me, a woman in a gray sweater, our upstairs neighbor, I'd seen her walking her dog. Another voice, "The ambulance is on its way." Someone lifting me, propping a cushion behind my back. And then the ambulance. When the paramedic pressed my wrist and asked for a family member's number, my mind went straight to my mother's. 11 digits I'd memorized back in elementary school. She'd changed numbers twice, I remembered them all. I recited them, and the paramedic punched them into his phone, waited, frowned. No answer. Anyone else? I gave him my father's number. It rang for a long time. Long enough that I'd given up hope. But on the very last ring, he picked up. The paramedic's eyes lit up. He spoke into the phone. Hello. Is this a family member of Nell Wainwright? She's being transported to City General for emergency surgery. We need you to come immediately. Hello. Hello. He pulled the phone away, looked at the screen, and his frown deepened. He hung up. Call again, I said, my voice muffled behind the oxygen mask. He tried again. 2 rings, then it was rejected. The third time, the number you have dialed is currently unavailable. The heart monitor beeped faster, a rapid beep 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 beep. The paramedic glanced at the screen and patted my shoulder. Easy. Deep breaths. Relax. I closed my eyes. In the darkness, the siren kept wailing, a bird that would never land, circling an invisible circle overhead, around and around. When they wheeled me into the hospital, fluorescent lights glided across my vision in rows, cold, harsh white that made my eyelids feel tight. Ceiling panels had several missing corners, revealing black ducts and cables like exposed bones. Nurses in white ran past, their uniforms fluttering, their footsteps quick and silent as cotton. Someone shouted, "Asterisk, make way." Asterisk, a man pushing a cart of instruments pressed himself flat against the wall to let us through, the cart's wheels rumbling low and round across the floor. I was rolled into a bright room. The surgical lamp bloomed above me like a giant white metallic flower, each petal blazing with light. It was so bright I had to squint, everything blurring into overlapping halos. Someone removed my oxygen mask and replaced it with something else over my mouth and nose, a rush of cool air mixed with rubber and chemicals, slightly acrid. Something cold touched my belly, then another sensation, like the lightest scrape of a blade across my skin. It didn't hurt, but I could feel it. Did the family arrive? Someone asked. No. No answer. Phones are off. We'll proceed. Patient safety first. We can get the signature later. A strange impulse to laugh bubbled up in me. What was Henry doing right now, I wondered. Probably in his navy suit, standing on a stage decorated with flowers, clutching his graduate diploma scroll, smiling that dimpled smile at the crowd below. Dad in the front row, his camera ready, lens cap already off. Mom beside him in that lilac dress, her pearl studs glinting in the stage lights. Clapping. Smiling. Telling the people around them, our son, our son. And here I was, a surgical lamp blazing above me, an ice-cold swab on my belly, and the anesthesiologist's voice from somewhere above, a young woman's voice, professionally calm, asterisk, sweetheart, look at me. Count backward from 10. Asterisk. Her eyes were moderate, lined in brown, a little winged at the corners, with a trace of sparkly eyeshadow, someone who'd had plans after work and hadn't bothered to take off her makeup. She crinkled her eyes at me. The skin above her mask, lit by the overhead lamp, looked almost translucent. 10, 9, 8. I made it to 7. When I woke up, the light in the room was nothing like the operating rooms. That had been harsh, cold, oppressive, a knife blade. This light was soft, warm, gray tinged with yellow, filtering through a slit in the curtains and falling in a pale golden bar across the white sheets. The curtains were that hospital-issue pale green, heavy fabric, drawn halfway. Outside, the sky was gray-blue, not fully light. It took me a few seconds to remember where I was. Then the pain rose from my lower right abdomen, slowly at first, cautious, like it was testing the waters, then all at once, flooding in. I bit my lip, my hand instinctively moving to my belly. Through the thin hospital gown, I felt the edge of a dressing, the square press of medical tape against my skin, like something holding me together. "You're awake." A young doctor in a white coat stood at the foot of the bed, stethoscope around his neck, holding a chart. He came over, pulled out a penlight, checked my pupils, then asked, "What's your name? Do you know where you are?" "Nell Wainwright," I said, my voice a husk. "Hospital." He nodded, scribbled something on the chart. "Ruptured appendix. We did emergency surgery last night. Cleaned out the abdominal cavity, sent the tissue for biopsy, but it's almost certainly suppurative appendicitis. You got here in time. Any later and it would have been much worse. How do you feel?" "Pain. Yeah. Normal. You'll feel better in a couple of days. No eating until you pass gas, then we'll start with clear liquids. Do you have family here?" "We couldn't reach anyone last night, so we had to proceed." I shook my head. The young doctor looked at me for a moment, didn't press, and said, "Rest. Press the call button if you need anything." Then he turned and walked out, the hem of his white coat flashing through the doorway. The room fell silent again. A complete silence, so deep I could hear the water rippling in the cup on the bedside table, the occasional bird outside, the far-off rumble of a cart's wheels in the hallway, then muffled by a closing door. Slowly, I reached my left hand out from under the covers. My fingertips touched the cool plastic of the bedside table, with a shallow scratch across its surface. I found my phone and pulled it toward me. My hand shook, pulling at the incision, sending a sharp spike of pain that I gritted my teeth against until it receded. Then I pressed the screen. 94 missed calls. The number blazed on the notification bar, stark and undeniable, like a plaque nailed to a wall. Each digit clear, indisputable. I hadn't misread it. 94. No decimal, no comma, just a 9 and a 4, a landscape I'd never seen before. My heart stuttered, then accelerated, and the monitor beeped in response. I opened the log. All from Dad. From just after 7 in the evening until nearly 1 in the morning. Shortest interval, mere seconds. Longest, 3 or 4 minutes. The whole record was a river without interruption, flowing from upstream to downstream, rushing over rocks, and each unanswered ring was a splash against stone. At the top was a text message, sent at 9:42 p.m., *, Nell, call us as soon as you get this. It's urgent. *. 1 minute later, *, Nell, please pick up. Which hospital are you at? *. After that, only the endless missed calls, one after another, like a train that kept pulling into the same station, stopping, departing, never finding the passenger it was waiting for. I stared at that log for a long time. The screen's glow fell across my face, probably pale, because my cheeks felt cold. The cold spread from my ears to my jaw, from my jaw to my neck, sinking deeper. It took me a long moment to realize it wasn't cold, it was wet. Tears soaked into my skin, cooling in the air. When had I started crying? I didn't know. Tears had run down my face, pooling at my chin, then dropping, one drop falling onto the screen, blurring the word Dad under a small smudge of moisture. I'd set that nickname ages ago, just Dad, no heart emoji like my mom's. I'd never changed it. Never thought to. Outside, the sky brightened some more. Gray-blue shifted to pale gold, and the bar of light from the curtain slit crept across the floor, from the foot of the bed to directly underneath it. Dust motes swirled in that beam, tiny, fine as ash, rising, spinning, falling, rising again, endless. My father's last missed call, 12:58 a.m. More than an hour before I saw the phone. If I called him back now, would he have gone to sleep? Would he have finally given up, put the phone down, closed his eyes? Or was he still awake, gripping that phone, its light still reflecting on his exhausted face, waiting for a ring that wouldn't come. I pressed redial. It rang once, then picked up. "Nell." The voice crashed over me, my father's, pitched higher than I'd ever heard it, raw and frayed from a night of waiting, words tumbling out too fast. "Which hospital? What floor? What room? We called you 100 times last night. Your mother was out of her." "I already had the surgery," I said. Silence. A sudden, violent silence, like a machine running at full speed that had been yanked from its power source, the blades still spinning on momentum, slower, slower, then stop. Just the soft crackle of static on the line, like a distant breath in an empty room. After a few seconds, my father's voice came back, but lower now, the air knocked out of him. "What surgery?" "Ruptured appendix. They took it out." More silence. Longer. Then footsteps on the other end, someone rising abruptly from a chair, the scrape of wood on floor. My mother's voice, distant, high and urgent. "What is it? What did she say?" My father must have covered the mouthpiece because I heard muffled words, then more commotion, a chair knocked over, footsteps, my mother's muffled cry, something trapped in her throat. My father's voice returned. "We're coming. Right now." "Don't," I said. "It's already done. I'm in the recovery room." Weren't you at the banquet hall last night?" The words came out before I could stop them. They surfaced from somewhere deep, frozen and cold, like a stone rising from black water, rhymed with frost. I hadn't planned them. I hadn't thought them through. They just came, like someone who'd been locked in the dark too long and had finally pushed the door open, the light blinding them, but they stepped through anyway. "No, listen," my father said, his voice paused, as if gathering words, or breath. "After your mother got your call, we ran out of there. Your mother didn't touch a single bite. She knocked over a glass of red wine when she stood up, stained her dress, didn't even notice." "Then what?" "I drove. We went to City General, the hospital you mentioned in your call, right? We went to the ER, asked if they'd admitted a Nell Wainwright. The nurse checked the computer and said no. I said, no, my daughter called 911, they said they were taking her here. The nurse checked again. Still no. You didn't go to the surgical waiting area. We didn't know you were going into surgery. The paramedic only said City General, nothing else. When we couldn't find your name in the ER, we thought you'd been sent somewhere else. We went to a second hospital. A third. A fourth. His voice trailed off, each name adding a new layer of ash. How many? 5. He paused. City General, St. Mary's, Southside Medical, County General, and then the Women's Hospital. Your mother thought it might be gynecological. We ran over there too. We went to every ER, one by one. Your mother was crying in the car the whole time, telling me to drive faster, then slower. I could barely hold the wheel. And then, I kept calling you. From the car. Over and over. For over an hour. Your mother said you must have your phone on silent. I said, no, Nell's a light sleeper, she'd hear it. But I kept calling. From 9 till after 1. Your mother's phone died. Mine was at 3%. I plugged it into the car charger and kept going. What time did you go home? After 2. Your mother's phone was completely dead. Mine was at 3%, one more call and it would have shut off. So we went home. There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. I couldn't name it, shame, maybe, or helplessness, something wrung dry and left in folds. My father's voice had always been steady, a bell that rang true on every note. But this bell had been struck by something heavy, the rim cracked, the note that came out now was a vibration, jagged and fraying. I stayed quiet for a moment. The sky outside had brightened again, the golden bar had moved from the floor to the edge of the bedsheet, slowly creeping toward the hand I'd left resting outside the covers. I felt the warmth of it, a small, gentle hand laid over my pale skin. "Dad, what time did you leave the banquet hall?" "When we got your call, around 7:40, he said. "Your mother was toasting the people at the next table, glass raised, when her phone rang. She answered. Her face went white. She set the glass down, wine splashed all over the table, and she was already walking out. I followed. Henry came running after us, asking what was wrong. I yelled, 'Your sister's in trouble,' and the elevator doors closed." "And Henry?" "He stayed at the hotel until after 10. After things wrapped up with his advisor, he came looking for us. He called me a few times. I was driving, my phone was on Bluetooth, so I heard him asking what hospital you were in. I said I didn't know. He ran around too, checking different places. He called your mother as well. Some of those missed calls you have are from him." I scrolled through the log. Sure enough, near the end, I saw Henry's name. Less frequent than Dad's, about every half hour, 6 calls total. One of them was just before 1 in the morning. I was in surgery by then, my phone locked away in the storage closet, no one to see his name flicker on the screen. Henry was out pretty late too, my father continued. When he got back, he asked me if we'd heard from you. I said no. He sat on the living room sofa for a long time before he went to bed. This morning, before dawn, he got up and called you twice more. No answer. Then he called his advisor and said he wouldn't be coming in today. I held the phone, my thumb brushing lightly over Henry's call record. A little green icon beside his name, indicating I'd dialed him. I'd always been the one to call him. "Henry, are you home yet?" "Henry, Mom says to pick up soy sauce." "Henry, did you leave your flash drive here?" He rarely called me first. Not because he didn't care, but because he was always so busy, classes, labs, papers, meetings with his advisor. His phone rang constantly, unlike mine, which lay quiet on the coffee table for hours at a time. "No," my father's voice came through again, "we really looked for you. All night. Your mother hasn't slept. You weren't home, so she sat in your room, looking at your desk, your lamp, and she'd start crying again, then she'd go to the bathroom and wash her face before I could see. I told her to sleep, she said no. She said she'd wait until you called." I bit my lip. His words fell on me like fine sand, sifting down slowly, accumulating, layer by layer, growing heavier, heavier. I didn't know what to say. "Just tell me which room," he said. "I'm coming." "Don't," I said, my voice barely a whisper, a feather dropping soundlessly to the floor. "You haven't slept." "I'm tired too. I want to rest." "You can come this afternoon." "No. Dad, I have to go." I pressed the red button. The call screen vanished, replaced by the log. The newest record sat at the top, green, marked, connected, duration 217. Below it, rows upon rows of red missed calls, a field soaked in blood, neatly arranged, silent, orderly, each one telling the same story, asterisk we called. You didn't answer, asterisk. I turned the phone face down on the bedside table. The light went dark, and the room returned to that dim, steady half-light. The golden bar from the curtain slit had crept another inch forward, landing on my right hand now, the warmth resting there like a hesitant kiss. I turned my head and looked at the beam of light. Dust motes still drifted through it, fine and dense, like bits of down carried from somewhere, some spinning, some rising straight up, some stopping midair and just hovering, as if time itself had been paused. I watched them for a while, then slowly exhaled a breath into the golden beam. The dust scattered for an instant, then gathered again, returning to their aimless drift. I remembered something from childhood. When I was 6 or 7, I caught a fever in the middle of the night, 103 degrees. My parents rushed me to the hospital, leaving Henry home alone. My father carried me up several flights of stairs, my mother following with my blanket and sippy cup. The ER had that same harsh white light, that same long, quiet corridor. I was delirious with fever, but I remembered my mother holding my hand, her fingers cold, whether from the weather or her nerves, I didn't know. My father's back at the registration window, his brown leather jacket, a worn spot at the shoulder. By the time the fever broke, dawn was breaking. My father asked what I wanted to eat. I said wonton soup. He went out and bought some, brought it back still steaming, the heat fogging his glasses. He spooned the wontons one by one, blowing on them to cool them, feeding me each bite. My mother wiped my hands and face with a warm cloth. I only ate 6 of them, but I remembered that warmth, from my mouth to my throat to my stomach, a small, hot river flowing through me, wrapping around everything cold and trembling. On the way home, my father carried me, my mother walking beside him, the 3 of us moving slowly through the early winter morning. The streets were empty, streetlights still casting circles of yellow in the cold air. My chin rested on my father's shoulder, and I saw a patch of stubble behind his ear, short and rough, like a small patch of black sandpaper. I reached up and touched it. He turned to look at me and smiled. "Awake?" he asked. "Yeah. Don't get sick again," he said. "You scared your mother to death." I looked at my mother, walking beside us, her eyes still red but her mouth curving up. She reached over and ruffled my hair. "Next time, tell us sooner. Don't tough it out." Then she pulled her hand back, adjusting the coat draped over her shoulders. Dawn was barely breaking, and the streetlights stretched their shadows long, overlapping and separating, like 2 quiet rivers. That morning and this one were nearly 20 years apart. 20 years of things happening. Henry got into a great school. Dad got a promotion. We moved from the old apartment on Willow Lane to the high-rise in Emerald Gardens. My room switched from a cramped alcove off the balcony to a large south-facing bedroom with a desk and a wardrobe. Some things changed. Some didn't. My mother still called from the kitchen, "Nell, come get the dishes." My father still sat on the sofa after dinner watching the news. Henry still spread his papers across the coffee table, head down, scribbling in the margins, chewing on the cap of his pen, frowning the same way he had as a child doing math problems. But some things had changed too. The kind of change that's quiet, like a crack in a wall, just a fine line at first, easy to miss, then gradually wider, longer, until one day you stand before it and see it's run the whole length of the wall, from ceiling to baseboard, and it's not easy to fix anymore. When did that crack start? I didn't know. Maybe when my mother said, "Your brother's coming home late, heat up his dinner for him." Maybe when my father handed Henry the car keys and said, "Take the new car, your sister can take a cab." Maybe when we went out for family dinners and Henry always sat in the front passenger seat, and I always sat in the back. Each of these things alone was nothing, insignificant details easy to overlook. But they accumulated, and over time, on that white wall, they crept, inch by inch, until one day, when the light fell at just the right angle, you realized the wall was no longer whole. I closed my eyes. The light vanished from my sight, replaced by a uniform, warm red glow, the sun through my eyelids, like a thin warm silk laid over my face. My breathing slowed, the monitor's beeps returning to a normal rhythm, steady, moderate, unhurried. I didn't know when I fell asleep. But when I woke again, the light from the curtain slit had shifted from gold to white, the harsh, unsparing white of noon. The hospital air conditioner hummed, its cool breath raising goosebumps on my bare arm. Beside the water cup on the bedside table sat a small slip of white paper with blue lines, a note in ballpoint pen, *, your father came by. You were asleep, so he left. Thermos on the table. Nurse Chin. *. I turned my head and saw a white thermos on the table. It was ours, the one from home, a plastic body with a deep scratch from when I'd knocked it over in the kitchen. Next to it, a plastic bag with a few oranges and a small carton of milk. Inside the thermos was congee. Plain white rice porridge, cooked thick, the grains nearly dissolved, glossy with the film of rice oil. I opened the lid and the warm steam hit my face, the smell of rice mixing with the faint antiseptic scent of the room, not good exactly, but not unpleasant either. The porridge was still warm, not scalding. I took a spoonful and let it sit on my tongue, that soft, slightly sweet warmth spreading across my taste buds, sliding down my throat, warming me all the way to my stomach. That spoonful of porridge hit my stomach, and suddenly my nose stung. A sudden, unprovoked sharpness, like someone had shoved me from behind and I'd stumbled forward, almost falling. Tears welled up again, but this time they didn't fall on my phone. I swallowed them back, along with the porridge, into the cold, hollow pit that had been empty all night. Around noon, Henry came. He pushed the door open softly, as if afraid of waking someone. He wore a light gray t-shirt under an unzipped denim jacket, the band logo on his shirt just visible. His hair was unkempt, bangs falling across half his forehead. He carried a paper bag from the bakery around the corner. I recognized it. "Hey," he said from the doorway, then walked in and set the bag on the bedside table. "Brought you some bread. You can't eat it yet, I know. Save it for later." "Yeah." He sat down in the chair beside the bed. It was a little too low, his knees nearly touched the bed frame, so he had to angle his legs sideways, an awkward posture. He rested his elbows on his knees, hands clasped together, fingers twining. "Last night." "I'm sorry," he said, not looking up. His voice was low. "When Mom got your call, I was still on stage. By the time I came down, they were already gone. I called you several times, no answer. I called Dad and he said they didn't know which hospital you were at. So I ran around too, checking different places, splitting up with them." "I know," I said. "I didn't know you were having surgery." He looked up at me, his eyes holding something I rarely saw in them. Henry always looked at people with that slight, easy confidence, dimples showing, a sense that everything was under control. But now the dimples were gone. His mouth was a tight line, dark circles ringing his eyes. "I know," I said again. "The paramedic called Dad, but you didn't get it." He paused. Then said, "Null, next time something happens, call me. Don't call Mom and Dad. Call me. My phone is never on silent. It's on 24/7. I looked at him. He said it with such earnestness, a kind of urgency I'd never heard from him before, as if he was afraid I wouldn't believe him. His fingers twisted tighter, knuckles white. "You never answer my calls either," I said. He froze. It was brief, a second, maybe two, but he froze. Then he opened his mouth, as if to defend himself, but the words stopped. He looked down at his tangled fingers, and after a long moment, he said, "I will from now on." I didn't know if I believed that * from now on. But I looked at the crown of his head, the small patch of scalp showing through his hair, the faded laundry label on his t-shirt collar, and I felt a deep exhaustion. Not from the surgery, not from the pain. It rose from somewhere deeper, like something slowly rising to the surface of a still pond. Henry, I said, what happened to your suit? The one from yesterday. He blinked, surprised by the question. Stored at the hotel. Mom said she'd pick it up later. Did it look good? I asked. You in it? He looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, a wry, complicated smile, like something stuck in his throat he couldn't swallow or spit out. I don't know if it looked good. I just remember running around to all those hospitals, sitting in the car all night in it. Probably needs pressing now. I laughed. It hurt, the incision pulled, but I didn't stop. The laugh was light, a feather drifting down, landing finally on the blanket. Henry laughed too, then stood and patted my shoulder, a light touch. Through the thin gown, I could feel the warmth of his palm. Get better, he said. I'll bring you whatever you want to eat. What do you feel like? Braised tofu with pork. Really? Grandpa used to make it. Braised tofu with pork. His eyes flickered with something, and he nodded. Okay. I'll learn how. At the door, he looked back. A quick glance, almost casual, but I knew it was deliberate. I saw his eyes catch the light for just a second before returning to normal. He raised a hand in a wave, and the door clicked shut. In the afternoon, my mother came. She stood in the doorway for a moment before coming in, clutching a plastic bag with a folded sweater, my gray hoodie, the one I'd worn out that morning. She'd probably gone home to pack some things for me. She stood beside the bed, not sitting. She wore no makeup today, a different woman entirely from the one on the phone last night in her pearl earrings and lilac cheongsam. She wore an old cardigan, her hair pulled back in a loose knot, stray wisps falling around her face, which she kept tucking behind her ears only to have them fall again. Her posture was awkward, hands clasped in front, thumbs rubbing each other. Nell, she began, how are you feeling? Better. Does it hurt? It's okay. She nodded. Then the silence settled over us like a fine dust falling from the ceiling, covering the space between us. She rubbed her fingers, adjusted her cardigan collar, and then said, yesterday, when I got your call, I was talking to the people at the next table. That was my fault. Mom, sit down. She hesitated, then pulled the chair over and sat. Even seated, she remained rigid, back straight, hands on her knees, ready to spring up at any moment. I looked at her profile. Her eyelashes trembled, and there was a faint redness at the corner of her eye, from lack of sleep or tears, I didn't know. Your father drove me all over looking for you. He nearly ran a red light. We kept calling you, one after another. You didn't answer. Then your father said, she's probably asleep, phone on silent. We should stop calling. She'll see it when she wakes up. But I couldn't stop. I took his phone and kept calling, all the way until your phone went to voicemail. By then it was already past midnight. My phone was in the storage locker outside the OR, I said. She paused, then went on, we got home after 2. Your father told me to take a shower and sleep. I said no, I'd wait for you to call. But I was so tired I fell asleep on the living room sofa. Your father woke me up just before dawn, and the first thing I asked was whether you'd called. He said no. And I was so scared. She raised a hand to her face, quickly, as if to hide something, but I saw the glint of moisture between her fingers. Her shoulders shook, barely, then she lowered her hand again, back to her knee, as if nothing had happened. No, she said, her voice steadier now, though that steadiness was clearly forced, I know I haven't always been fair. Between you and your brother. I've played favorites. I know that. I looked at her profile. The sunlight from the curtain slit fell across her lap, a pool of warm gold on her gray pants. Her fingers rested in that light, tips glowing faintly, her nails short and neat with little white half-moons. "I'm okay," I said. "Mom, go home and rest. You haven't slept." She looked up and met my eyes. In hers was something I couldn't name, something thick and complicated, like a bowl of dough that had been stirred too long. You could see all the particles spinning, but they would never fully blend. "I'm sorry," she said. Those 4 words came out raspy, like an old violin whose strings had rusted, each note barbed with static. She dropped her head, stood, walked to the window, and turned her back to me. Her shoulders trembled. She didn't make a sound, but the trembling said everything. I looked at her back. The cardigan had a small patch of pilling at the shoulder, from years of wear and washing. Her bun was messier than usual, several strands escaping and drifting in the air. Her back curved slightly, as if carrying too much weight, a weight that pressed an invisible bend into her spine. "Mom," I called. She stopped. Didn't turn. "I want your fish soup." Her shoulders stilled. After a few seconds, she turned, her face still carrying the remnants of her tears, eyes red-rimmed. Her expression tried for a smile, worked several times before it managed a small, fragile curve. "When you're out of here, I'll make it for you. Carp. Tofu. A white broth. Your favorite from when you were little." "Okay." She stood there, wiped the corner of her eye with the back of her hand, straightened her collar, and said, "I'll go home and get things ready. You rest. Don't move around too much. I'll bring you soup tomorrow." After she left, the room was quiet again. But it was a different quiet now. No longer the hollow, empty silence of no one answering. It was filled with something soft, like a room that had stood empty for years and now bore the signs of life, a potted plant on the windowsill, a warm cup of tea on the table, the faint scent of food in the air. That quiet didn't scare me anymore. I picked up my phone and scrolled back to the call log. 94 red missed calls, like a long red thread stretching from last night into the early morning. I looked at those red markers, each one an incomplete connection, a hand reaching out in the dark, knocking and knocking on a door that wouldn't open. I'd never stood on the other side of that door before. Now I knew what it felt like. It wasn't cold. It was something more complicated, a tangle of guilt and sorrow and a strange, unnamed warmth. Like a soup that had simmered too long, when you lifted the lid, it wasn't clear and translucent but cloudy, with a slick of fat on top, white and steaming. You drink it, and it burns your mouth, but it warms your stomach. I scrolled further down the log. Last week, the week before, the week before that. My calls with Dad were sparse, the same short exchanges, eaten. "Yeah. Got enough money?" "Enough." "Okay, bye." My mother's were a little longer. "Did you do laundry? Did you change your sheets? Are you coming home this weekend?" Henry's were the shortest, sometimes just seconds, "Busy, talk later." And that later never came. I'd never thought much of it. That was just how we worked. Each of us orbiting in our own lane, crossing paths occasionally, bumping shoulders, confirming we were still there, then separating again. Those short, dry conversations were like signal lights on a track, flashing "I'm here," then going dark until the next pass. But now I lay in a hospital bed, and 4 taped to my hand, the incision a dull ache, looking at those call logs, and I realized they were too short. Too short for anyone to say a full sentence. Too short for the tail of a word to fully land on the ground. Too short, like a door that opened just a crack and closed again, letting in just enough light and sound to keep you guessing who was on the other side. The light outside was dimming. The golden beam from the curtain slit had faded to a grayish purple, contracting like an eye slowly closing. I heard nurses changing shifts in the hallway, laughter, someone saying, "So-and-so in room 214 is discharged today." The rumble of a cart, nearer, then farther. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on one by one, the warm yellow of street lamps, then the distant white specks of high-rises. I pressed my phone screen awake. 94 missed calls. The text, Nell, call us as soon as you get this. It's urgent. All still there. I read it 3 times, then closed it and opened my notes app. I typed a line. When I get out, make every call longer. I set the phone down and looked at the ceiling. The crack was still there, snaking from the light fixture, resting quietly on the white paint. If I stood up and looked closer, I could probably see the raised edges, feel the rough texture. But I didn't get up. I lay there, letting that crack hang above me like a quiet, sleeping river. The day I was discharged was a Wednesday. My father drove, my mother sat in the back, leaving the front passenger seat for me. She wore a clean jacket today, hair neatly combed, a light touch of lipstick. She held the same plastic bag with oranges in it, this time there were 6. When I got in the car, she pressed one into my hand, have it on the way. The orange was warm, as if it had been in her pocket the whole time. I held it, the warmth traveling from my palm of my arm, to my shoulder, my neck, behind my ears. I buckled my seatbelt and watched the hospital's main building recede through the windshield. Going home? My father asked. Yeah. Home. As the car pulled out of the hospital gate, sunlight flooded through the windshield, making me squint. My father reached up and lowered the sun visor, glancing at my mother in the rearview mirror, then at me. The corner of his mouth quirked, not quite a smile, but close. I'll make the fish soup when we get back, my mother said from the back seat. Carp and tofu, white broth. I had the market down the street save a live one for me this morning. Good. The car merged into the midday traffic. Our neighborhood was west of the city, off the highway, 2 turns, then there. The plane trees along the road were bright green in June light, the breeze from the half-open window carrying the warm, green scent of summer. I held the warm orange and watched shops drift past, the convenience store, the fruit stand, the laundry, the dry cleaners, the breakfast place already closed with its metal shutter half drawn, its faded sign still catching the afternoon sun. On the highway, traffic loosened, and my father accelerated to about 60. The wind grew stronger, whipping my hair back. I reached up to smooth it and caught my mother's reflection in the rearview mirror. She was looking out the window, a soft curve at the corner of her mouth, relaxed, at ease. When we got home, the draft from the stairwell hit me. I hadn't stood here in 3 days. That familiar smell, damp, mixed with the cooking smells from neighbors' kitchens, settled over me, familiar and welcome. My mother walked ahead, fumbling with the keys, the lock sticking for 2 turns before it opened. Need to oil that, she muttered, and pushed the door open. The living room was just as I'd left it. The dent I'd made in the sofa cushion had bounced back, the upholstery smooth and flat, like no one had ever curled there. The blue paperback was gone from the coffee table, someone had put it away. In its place stood a vase with white lilies, 3 or 4 in bloom, their yellow pollen dusting the petals, a faint, clean scent drifting through the room. Henry bought those, my mother said, following my gaze. He said girls like flowers. I looked at the lilies. Pure white petals, slightly curled at the edges, like freshly folded stationery. One wasn't fully open yet, the bud tight, just a crack at the top revealing a hint of pale yellow. I walked over, bent, and breathed in the scent, light, clean, seeping into my nose like a quiet sound. From the kitchen came the sound of my father turning on the faucet, then the rhythmic thump-thump of a knife on a cutting board. He'd taken the fish out of the fridge, scaling, gutting, rinsing, not the most skilled movements, but careful. My mother was on the balcony, gathering the laundry she'd hung out days ago. The sheet billowed in the wind like a white sail. She rose on tiptoe to pull it down, folded it twice over her arm, then reached for another. I sat on the sofa, in that same hollow I'd pressed into so many times, and this time, the incision didn't pull when I settled. The vase on the coffee table caught the light, casting a small transparent halo on the white painted surface, like a quiet seal. The lily fragrance mingled with the scent of ginger and scallions drifting from the kitchen, a song made of smell, slowly filling every corner of the room. I pulled out my phone and opened the call log again. The 94 missed calls were still there, every single one, untouched, unoverridden. Red markers lined up from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m., so many they nearly filled the screen. I looked at them for a while, then pressed delete. A pop-up appeared, delete all selected records. I pressed cancel. I set the phone back on the coffee table, screen up. The afternoon sunlight fell across it at an angle, catching the T94 and making it glow faintly. The lilies continued their quiet perfume. From the kitchen, the fish soup began to bubble and simmer in its pot. Outside, a neighbor's child shouted something from the street below, a clear, high voice that rose and was carried away by the wind. I leaned back against the sofa cushions and closed my eyes. The moment my lids shut, all the light and sound and scent receded, leaving only a uniform, warm red glow spreading across the inside of my vision, like a very warm, very calm sea. The 94 missed calls were still on my phone. I wouldn't delete them. Not because I needed to remember anything. Not because I cared. But because they had become something that simply was, a presence that would not disappear, a silence that spoke. Like a crack in a wall that you plaster over, but it remains, beneath the surface you can't see, quietly extending. It doesn't vanish, it doesn't have to. It's just there, inside that white wall, part of its skeleton. Years from now, I'll probably remember this afternoon. The sunlight coming through the window, falling across the white tabletop. The lilies opening in their vase. The fish soup simmering in the kitchen, steam rising, the scent of ginger and scallion in the air. My father slicing ginger. My mother folding sheets. And me, sitting at the center of it all, holding a warm orange in my hand, my phone screen showing 94 call records that would never be deleted. They're still there. They'll always be there.